So we talked about AOV, which is effectively what the gross order value or the net order is, what the customer is effectively paying. And here what we're doing is we're stripping out the VAT. So this is what the company is effectively keeping. Then there's the cost of goods. So that is the cost of the product or service. So if you're providing, say, online surveys or whatever, and you're having to pay for people to do those surveys, for example, or a maintenance company where you've got guys going out to do work for maintenance, that's where you need to capture that cost. And here I've got write-offs. This is because I do spend a lot of time with consumer-based business selling products, and it's prudent to assume that some of the stuff that's going to come back, you won't be able to resell. You won't be able, it's not worth manipulating it, so you need to write it off. You need to find a way to dispose of it. So it's either faulty products that you can't claim back from the manufacturer, damaged products that you've agreed to take back from the customer, or it's just out of date. So it's prudent that you make some assumptions for what I call terminal stock. And I think if you're doing apparel, you may want to be really prudent and say 20 to 30% of that stuff that comes back, you won't be able to resell it. Then we're into delivery costs. So do you remember we talked about this being the cost of effectively getting product to your customers? So it's everything from cost of storing the product, picking, packing it, and getting it delivered to the customer. Customer services. So that's the cost of the people answering phones, doing online chat, but also any call management systems that you've got to log calls. As you get bigger, it's important you start tracking all of this because you want to make sure people are doing the right job, keeping to their scripts. You might want to record the conversations, for example. But also, if you get bigger, you want to have a good understanding. How many calls can one person accommodate? How do we deal with overseas countries if I need foreign language speakers? How are we going to make that work? And also thinking about, do you do 9 to 5? Do you do 24 hours? You need to think about all those things and getting some good stats. But again, when you're starting out, keep it really simple. But as you get bigger, it's important that you really do focus on that because you can lose a lot of money by not managing this process well, because you won't have happy customers. But if it's not well structured, it can cost a fortune. And the next is transaction costs. And PayPal is really important. We talked about that before, but SagePay is pretty secure. So you need to think about what the best payment options are. You must offer PayPal. If you're B2B, offer Stripe as a solution for people to pay. And if you're doing B2B, and GoCardless is another great option. Bit of a pain to get set up. Effectively now allows you to set up a direct debit for you to take the money each month. So I think depending on your business, you need to think and do a bit of research as to what are the best payment options for my customer. One, to make your admin easy, but also that's your customers can be happy to comply with and actually use. And I put Klarna here as well because they're doing a lot of marketing at the moment, and this is where they're offering interest-free credit. It's likely they might get investigated bizarrely by the FCA because obviously I'm not sure they're communicating clearly enough to customers. But PayPal also offer 12 months interest-free credit. You'll find though, if you talk to any agencies, they'll say you've got to offer Klarna if you're offering any fashion or beauty. I'm not sure, but it's expensive, and obviously there's more admin involved, and you've got another payment platform you need your accounting team to keep on top of. So again, you just need to think about your competitors, and if you're not offering it and you think it's going to put you at a weaker position, then Klarna is an option for you. Not a great fan, but I can see the value for certain businesses. So once we strip out all those costs, that gives us the contribution. That's effectively how much money we're making on that order, because these are effectively, although some of these costs are fixed, we can apportion these costs per order. So I think what's really neat now is to think about how we measure the contribution from that order versus the cost of getting that order. And I think that's where we look at the cost of acquisition of that customer. And that's really your advertising costs. And this is your paid advertising. And I think any costs that are related to that, whether you've got an agency that's bidding for the ads, putting the campaigns together, put them in as well. Buying and marketing, I've left separate here because depending on your business, you may want to include in your advertising when you're looking at your ROI, that you want to include the costs of your loyalty and referral schemes and the cost of any agencies and the cost of your team as well. And I think for certain businesses, I think packaging it together is important, because what can happen over time is that you think you're making money, but your overhead is just growing exponentially, or you're spending too much on third parties. So all you're doing is that you led yourself into a false sense of security, is that you're not capturing all the real costs. So sometimes when you're looking at the ROI, you want to capture all the costs related to engaging with and getting that customer to make that purchase. That includes all the marketing activities, and in some cases buying activities as well. And that leaves overheads, and that really includes the costs of all the non-business direct business related activities. So that's the leadership team, that's the technology, that's finance, that's HR, etc. But you need to make sure you can actually fund it. So the idea is that your contribution should fund your advertising, your buying and marketing activities, and any sales resource that you've got, but also your fixed overhead. So I'm going to talk now about 4 measures I think could be really useful to you. The first one is that particularly if you're selling products, is tracking what the average number of purchases that a customer makes over time. So here we've targeted 1.3. But if you've got a small group that you're confident that could purchase from you every 3 months, that's a really important bit of insight. And that could be really important for you in thinking in terms of, well, if we know that they've got propensity to buy regularly, have we got interesting products to offer to them beyond just renewing what they've currently got each quarter? So it's thinking, so you can think about your marketing calendar, for example. The next is the lifetime value. And I think the easy way to do this, particularly if you're a consumer business, is to look at it over a 12-month period. If you're a SaaS business, then you probably need to think about what your attrition rate is to work out what the average lifetime is. So if it's 20%, i.e. you lose you lose each year 20% of all your customers, just apply, say 5 years, just apply 5 years. And then the cost of acquisition is basically that advertising cost we talked about here. So your ROI is effectively your contribution times the number of repeat purchases divided the cost of acquiring that customer. And I think pretty much across the board, it's got to be 2 times for you to be getting to break even. Unless you've got a huge amount of overhead, as long as your costs are kind of proportionate, as long as you're getting 2 times, you're in good shape. But remember, this is lifetime value. So it may be on that first order, you could be losing money, but you know you're going to get customers to repurchase. And I kind of have a good sort of benchmark here is because a few people have asked me this in the last couple of weeks, is you probably, if you're doing repeat purchase, if you've got the opportunity for repeat purchase, you could be spending up to 30 quid, maybe 50 pounds to acquire a quality customer that's going to keep buying from you as you're selling products. If you're a SaaS business, it could be thousands. So you just need to think about what your business is and applying something that's really appropriate. And remember, if it's a high cost initially, it's because you're competing with people for paid advertising space who are outbidding, and they're outbidding because they feel they've got the profit or they've got the cash to spend that kind of money. So if you know that that's not sustainable, then you've got to reduce your paid advertising spend and find other ways to get people to your website. Just going back to social media and getting more people to follow you, finding other ways, maybe through affiliates, to get them to purchase through your website. Right, last active slide. And actually, I was thinking about this. So when I did this, I did a similar deck to an apparel business. And actually, the conclusion we reached was this was probably the most important part of what they were doing. They had a really good understanding about how digital marketing worked. They perhaps needed some help in terms of benchmarking what success looked like. But what we realized was we weren't fully utilizing the customer database or the customer contacts that we had and all the rich data we had in terms of what they bought. So if you know somebody likes jeans, buys jeans from you, maybe you need to retarget them to buy, if there's a new range coming in, that they're the first person to be targeted. So it's the more insight you've got in terms of what your customers like, or if you're selling homeware and there are people who particularly like, they just bought a sofa, or maybe now you should target them to get lights, and it's just trying different propositions out to find which ones work best. And you'll find that there's certain the campaigns that always work best are always around price. But obviously, if you're discounting stuff, that's just coming out of your margin. But if you can find other propositions that work really well, that have worked well in the past, then repeat them. And ones that just don't work, just for whatever reason, it just doesn't get engagement or it's not been targeted, revisit them, think about maybe you targeted the wrong people, or maybe just don't do them again. Because this is all about trying to figure out who loves you. So trying to find out the people who bought from you, who really like your proposition, like your products, and like buying from you. So it's about dividing all the stats and then ruling by applying those stats to apply the best strategies. So the normal way people do this is by cohort. What they mean is by time cohort when they first purchase. So if you bought in this December, right, we're going to target them in 3 months' time for another purchase. But maybe it's better to do some analysis in terms of where the value is amongst those customers. How recently they purchased, how frequently they purchased, and how much they spent. Or sometimes it's called RFM. So if you've got a database, you can stick it on a bloody spreadsheet. You'll probably find if you've got 25,000 customers, there's probably 300 who just love spending money with you. And maybe you need to do something special for these customers and target them first, particularly if stuff's coming up first, so they feel really special. So more insight, the more thoughts you can get about who likes you. And also they're a great source for getting feedback. So if I was going to do any research, I'd focus on the people who really like me first to figure out what we should continue doing, and then maybe find out the stuff that they don't like, which we stop doing, because then there are similar customers, similar to them, who maybe we can find on social media, who we can target. The other thing, CRMs, which are bane of my life. Everybody I work with has a problem with the CRM system, and I would just encourage you to try and keep it simple. Remember what you're trying to do here, which is to capture leads and to track the way you've communicated to those leads. Nothing more complicated than that. But somehow it seems to get really, really complicated. So I would start with something, even if it's just on a Google Sheet or a free platform, before you spend lots of money on something like Salesforce, because I just know so many people who've created stuff that's really complicated. Nobody knows how to use it, and it's just not worth the effort. So again, I'd start something really simple, even if it's just a Google Sheet to start with. And then going back to sort of intelligence, if you've got this great insight from this, maybe from this RFM analysis about who buys from you frequently and spends a lot of money with you, see if you can find some commonality in terms of where they're located, the demographic in terms of age, sex, gender, for example, but also what their interests are, because that will enable you to do some targeted advertising by geography on Google, but in terms of demographics and interests on social media can be really, really effective. So rather than you using lookalikes, which are bloody expensive, which is getting Facebook and Instagram to do it for you, that you set the criteria yourself. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is strategies to build retention, because going back to this customer, what we recognized is that we had a really rich database, and actually what we should probably be doing is trying to do more to engage with those customers. And the challenge is that when we looked at all the data, which is very common, is that the most effective campaigns were those that were offering a big discount. And in many cases, it becomes so endemic that the customers are almost waiting for that. They can almost time the next sale. And really, we want to get away from that as much as we can. And the best way to do that is to think about newness, is that when you can offer something new, because there'll be a group of people who want the latest thing before everybody else. So if you know who those people are, give them the opportunity perhaps to get first option to secure those products while the stock's available. This can work for furniture, it can work for art, it can work for clothes. And it may even work for, if you're selling a service, that you've got a limited offer, that you target those customers first. The next thing is, in terms of costs, when we looked at that chart earlier, we need to weigh up the costs of rewarding loyalty. So there's a cost of all this stuff I talked about doing, managing a database, someone spending, it could be you doing it, it could be your marketing team doing it. If they're spending time on that, they're not spending time on something else. So there is like an opportunity cost, but there's a physical cash cost, which is you may be spending money on advertising. You may be spending money on a loyalty scheme by giving rewarding points to customers. So you need to compare that versus discounting. My preference would be, I think you're better off trying to avoid the discounting route and more around rewarding loyalty and repeat purchase, because it does less to what's the word, damage the brand. Something like discounting that ultimately damages a brand, and people kind of wait for that discount. So if you can try and reward people for coming back, that's a great way to encourage repeat purchase. And it could be that the cost of giving that reward is less than spending money on advertising. So I hope you've all found this really useful. Apologies, it's really, really quick. Please don't hesitate to contact me direct through LinkedIn or through Big Marker to see if there's anything I can help you with. But the most important, let's talk about why am I doing this? So I am doing this to raise money. So this is my first attempt at it. We're going to do something with King's University as well. So this is a bit of a trial run. So it's all about, hopefully you've learned something from this webinar that you can apply to your business. So that makes me feel good that I've shared something that's valuable. Maybe there's something that you want to explore further through a bit of research. That's great. Whether I can help you or not doesn't matter. But ultimately, if you found this useful or valuable, I'd like to urge you to make a donation to the Kingston University Hardship Fund, whatever you can afford, whatever you think is appropriate. What we do at the Hardship Fund is give grants to students who, through no fault of their own, don't have the backup of parents like myself. My son, for example, goes to Kingston. He's now back at home, and mum and dad are able to help him. So he's in a good place. But there are lots of bright students who come from disadvantaged background, don't have any money, and most importantly, don't have the opportunity for casual part-time work. So it's going to be really hard for them. So the Hardship Fund works that people make a claim, and then there's a panel that assesses their claim, and then we give them a grant. And it's really for stuff as simple as paying for food. So anything you can do to help will be fantastic. Thank you so much for watching this webinar, and let me wish you a very good day. Many thanks. Bye-bye.